They thought it was a routine escort. Clear skies, short range, no contact expected. The kind of mission that ends before it begins. But somewhere over the ridge, the air changed. Static on comms, a flicker on radar. Then nothing but light, impact, and the kind of silence that teaches you what trust costs. Captain Erin Rains didn't freeze. She recalculated, fought gravity, and turned a dying aircraft into proof that training is only the beginning. What followed wasn't luck. It was endurance measured in heartbeats and altitude lost. Before we show you what happened when one Marine met betrayal at 30,000 feet, make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because this wasn't a story about survival. It was about control when there shouldn't have been any. Before sunrise, Falcon Ridge Air Station lay quiet beneath a dull violet sky. The wind pressed low across the tarmac, carrying with it the faint metallic tang of fuel and dust. Floodlights cut narrow cones through the mist, illuminating the stillness of machines waiting for movement. At 0500 hours, the world seemed to hold its breath. Inside the main hangar, the sound of tools and distant hydraulics echoed like subdued thunder. Mechanics moved in silence, their silhouettes passing through vapor and light. The air was heavy with routine, disciplined, practiced, exacting. No one raised their voice here. Even the engines waiting to ignite felt restrained. This was a place where motion was measured, and calmness was its own form of strength. Captain Erin Rains stood beside her aircraft, gloved hands resting on the nose cone as if listening for a heartbeat. She had flown longer than most at the station, through years marked by sand, sea, and sky. Yet she still approached every mission like the first. Her posture carried a quiet gravity, focused, self-contained, deliberate. Her flight suit bore the weathering of hundreds of sorties, faint oil stains, threadbare seams, the muted insignia of a squadron that had lost more than it gained. A faint ripple of wind pushed through the hangar doors. Beyond them, the horizon began to gray. Erin's breath formed a soft trace in the chill, fading before it could rise. She moved with economy, checking the wing sensors, the landing struts, the fuel intake. Nothing wasted, nothing uncertain. Each step followed muscle memory layered over years of discipline. Inside the cockpit, instrument panels glowed pale amber. The hum of auxiliary power filled the confined space like a distant heartbeat. Erin slid into the seat, the harness locking across her shoulders with a practiced motion. The canopy lowered with a hiss. Her reflection, fractured across the glass, looked both near and unreachable. A soldier folded into her machine. She powered the main systems. The checklist unfolded with ritual precision: fuel nominal, hydraulics stable, avionics green, though one panel flickered. A faint pulse, almost imperceptible. She noticed it but didn't react. In aviation, emotion was currency best spent elsewhere. A small anomaly in a sea of normalcy was just another quiet visitor in the cockpit. Still, she marked it in her logbook, her routine preserved composure. The radio crackled softly, a brief static pulse that cut through the hum. For a moment, she thought she heard a fragment of voice, too faint to discern. Then silence. She adjusted frequency, rechecked channels. Clear, nothing out of order. Outside, the first strands of sunlight reached the flight line, coloring the aircraft fuselages in copper and steel. The desert beyond the perimeter stretched endless, its dunes still cool before the heat would rise. Erin's eyes lingered on the horizon, an unbroken expanse where silence and distance met. She always looked there before each flight, not out of ritual, but remembrance. There had been another horizon once, another voice over comms that had cut out mid-sentence. She never spoke of it, and no one asked. Her composure was her barrier, and her duty was its foundation. She continued her pre-flight, methodical and quiet, A passing ground crewman offered a nod, not a greeting, but acknowledgement. In this place, respect replaced conversation. The mission brief had been simple reconnaissance over low terrain, a mapping run, no engagement expected. Clear skies, minimal interference, return before midday, routine by every measure. Yet simplicity was often the prelude to silence, and silence in war had its own gravity. Aaron reviewed the flight plan once more. Altitudes, checkpoints, weather reports. She committed each coordinate to instinct. It wasn't trust in technology that kept her alive. It was trust in discipline. At the ready line, the air shimmered with heat from auxiliary engines coming online. The sound deepened into vibration, a living pulse through metal and ground. Aaron watched her crew finalize external checks, each movement synchronized like choreography learned through repetition. She waited until the last indicator turned green. Then, without hesitation, she switched to primary power. The cockpit vibrated as turbines spooled, the hum rising into a full-bodied roar. It was the kind of sound that erased thought and replaced it with focus. Through the canopy, Falcon Ridge seemed smaller now, the world condensed into light and dust. She engaged comms Falcon control. Reins, ready for taxi. Her voice was calm, precise. No hesitation, no wait, just process. The reply came back, crisp and standard. Falcon 1, cleared to taxi runway 21. Wind steady at 8 knots. Godspeed. Captain, Godspeed. The kind of words said without belief, but always said. Aaron released the brakes, guiding the aircraft forward. The wheels rolled across painted concrete, over lines that separated control from chaos. Ground crew stepped back, raising hands in salute as she passed. Beyond them, the taxiway stretched like a measured corridor into the rising dawn. As she lined up on the runway, a low hum filled the cabin. Not mechanical, not electrical, but environmental. The sound of everything waiting, the smell of jet fuel, the static against her gloves, the dry taste of filtered air. Each sensation folded into the rhythm of preparation. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes. The world narrowed to pulse and breath. Somewhere beyond the noise, memory flickered. A photograph folded in a flight jacket, a name once painted on a wing. Then, with deliberate calm, she opened her eyes again. Throttle advanced. Pressure built. The aircraft shuddered against restraint. Falcon 1 rolling. Engines roared to life, gathering force until air itself seemed to bend. The ground blurred beneath her. The cockpit vibrated, instruments steadying under acceleration. At 150 knots, the Earth began to lose hold. At 200, it surrendered. Falcon 1 lifted from the runway, climbing into pale gold light. The transition from ground to sky was seamless, the kind of perfection earned through repetition and faith. Below, Falcon Ridge receded into geometry and haze. Above, the open air was infinite, silent, and unknowable. For a few seconds, the world was soundless. The hum of systems faded beneath the hush of altitude. Aaron leveled the craft, the horizon curving before her, an unbroken line between blue and amber. Her eyes softened, not in relief but recognition. There was always this moment, the pause between departure and mission, between control and surrender. It was where every flight began to carry meaning beyond its orders. Her gloved hand brushed against the small charm tied near the throttle, a fragment of her late father's unit patch, frayed and sun-faded. Not superstition, just continuity. A faint tremor rippled through the instrument panel. The same flicker as before, slightly stronger now. She noted it again. One line in the log, one thought unspoken. The radio hissed faintly, then cleared. Nothing followed. She steadied her breathing, adjusted trim, and pressed forward into the glare. The morning sun caught the edges of her canopy, scattering light like shattered glass. From the ground, she was only a moving reflection, a fragment crossing sky. From within, she was a stillness in motion, bound to the purpose that defined her. Her mind quieted, as it always did once airborne. No words, no fear, only flight. As Falcon 1 disappeared into the upper horizon, the world below blurred into colorless distance. For Captain Aaron Rains, flying was never about arrival. It was about endurance. The discipline to rise when silence tried to claim you. And as the first layer of cloud folded around her, Falcon Ridge vanished beneath the haze, leaving only the hum of engines and a feeling she couldn't name. The sky ahead was empty, yet it carried weight, a silence that wasn't peace, but warning. At 23,000 feet, the world below disappeared. Only the vast white haze of atmosphere remained. Cloud drift, sunlight fractured on the canopy, and the low mechanical hum that felt more like pulse than sound. The cockpit was a sealed world, wrapped in vibration and rhythm. Every flicker of light, every tremor of airflow, existed in its own measured place. Captain Aaron Rains kept one gloved hand steady on the throttle, her eyes moving through instruments with the quiet repetition of habit. Each gauge told a fragment of truth. Each reflection on the canopy glass offered a fragment of uncertainty. The sky was bright, too bright, a sterile gold that flattened distance and erased the horizon. The light gave everything a washed, unreal quality, as if the world below had dissolved. Inside the aircraft, silence ruled. It was the disciplined kind, not empty, but structured. The quiet between transmissions and trust. Lieutenant Mason Cole sat to her right, posture squared, headset secure. His focus was procedural, exacting. He was newer to long-range flight, still bound to checklists and rhythm. To Aaron, that devotion was both admirable and dangerous. She had learned long ago that silence in the sky was rarely peace. The hum of hydraulics pressed faintly under their feet, steady, perfect, almost soothing. A vibration through the control column reminded her the machine was alive and listening. They were 60 miles north of the planned route, banking over terrain so dry it fractured into colorless geometry. No visible heat plumes, no radar spikes, no threats, only the unbroken monotony of safety. It was the kind of flight that made people forget danger still existed. Mason adjusted the comms panel, fingers brushing across dials. The static folded into a faint whisper, then cleared. He noted the transition frequency, confirming the handoff to the next control sector. Routine. Expected. But the channel stayed empty. No acknowledgement. No ground control tone. Only the hollow hiss of an open line. Aaron didn't look over. Her eyes stayed on altitude. "Repeat the handoff," she said. Quiet, controlled. He did. Twice. The same nothing answered back. The hum of the engines filled the gap like an accusation. Silence in a cockpit carried weight, not just absence of sound, but the presence of something waiting. Aaron had felt it before in combat airspace where radar died, where allies vanished mid-transmission. It was the kind of stillness that stripped hierarchy down to instinct. She reached for the secondary radio, checking encryption, scanning lower bands. The static deepened, a low oceanic hiss that faded into pulse. Mason frowned, tapped the console. Signal dropout. Maybe atmospheric. His voice was steady, textbook calm. Aaron didn't answer right away. She adjusted gain, then listened. No interference pattern, no burst transmission. Just blank. Too blank. She knew the sound of chance. This wasn't it. Outside, the light sharpened. Blinding. Clean. Almost surgical. Heat shimmered across the forward view. It was strange for that altitude. The kind of refraction that looked like motion but wasn't. She checked the thermal sensors. Ambient readouts normal. Ground heat low. Still clean, Mason said. Visuals stable. Her hand rested on the trim, steadying the subtle pitch. Copy. She didn't believe it. It wasn't logic that told her something was off. It was years of surviving what logic couldn't predict, the gap between what instruments said and what instinct whispered. The desert below stretched in still geometry, lines of sand and stone carved by wind. Nothing moved. Yet her eyes kept returning to the same patch of brightness, a small glint at 2 o'clock low, like sunlight bouncing from glass. She shifted elevation a fraction, subtle enough not to draw attention. The glint vanished. Another appeared. It wasn't motion. It was timing. The reflection pulsed in rhythm, irregular but intentional. She said nothing. Instead, she adjusted the radar range to long sweep. The screen returned in slow waves of light, static interference, unclear patterning. A faint contact flashed, then disappeared. No signature, no transponder. Ghost return, Mason said, seeing it too. Probably ground clutter. She didn't respond. Her mind mapped the possibilities. Reflection from canyon glass, or active sensor sweep from below. Either way, something had eyes on them. She checked their altitude again, scanning edge readings. Everything normal, everything wrong. Falcon control. This is Falcon 1. Do you read? Mason's voice entered the open channel again. No reply. The only answer was the endless, tonal hum of systems, the faint pop of pressure change, the creak of expanding panels and heat. Every sound grew distinct, amplified by silence. Aaron's breathing slowed. The habit of control returned. Lower heart rate, reduced oxygen burn, the discipline of stillness. It wasn't fear that filled her. It was focus. They had crossed into something unseen. Not an ambush. Not yet. But a threshold where silence became environment. She marked their position manually, calculating bearings against terrain patterns she barely recognized. The desert below wasn't featureless anymore. It was too still, too uniform, as if waiting. Mason turned slightly toward her. The light through his visor caught the tension in his jaw. We've got redundancy. If comms are out, She raised a hand, stopping him. Not reprimand, reflex. The kind of gesture that meant listen. Beyond the hum, there was another sound, faint, rhythmic, too soft to place. It wasn't mechanical. It was atmospheric, like wind distorted through heat. She glanced outside. Nothing but sky and reflection. Yet every instinct told her they were being watched. Not by radar, not by ground units, but by something close enough to listen. Switch to passive sweep, she said quietly. The radar line slowed, soft pulses stretching over the landscape. 3 seconds later, a faint trace appeared at the edge of range, then blinked out again. She knew what that meant. Deliberate silence. Whoever it was. They were flying dark. The hum beneath her feet deepened as the aircraft drifted slightly in crosswind. She corrected gently, feeling the weight of response. The tension between human and machine, between calm and warning. In that suspended moment, Aaron felt the distance between them and everything human close like a door. The cockpit had become the world, and the world outside was no longer safe. Mason broke the stillness. You think we're... She didn't let him finish. Her tone was calm, final. We're not alone. He didn't argue. He didn't need to. Outside, the desert mirrored the sky, pale, endless, silent, but the reflections no longer looked random. They looked like eyes. Aaron rechecked systems, switched to contingency frequency, logged coordinates. Her voice was steady, almost detached, as if the silence had trained her to speak less and observe more. The flight path ahead stretched clean and clear, Yet her pulse told her otherwise. The kind of warning that doesn't arrive through instruments, only through intuition honed by loss. The glints at the edge of vision persisted, too deliberate, too synchronized with their movement. The radio gave one last flicker of static, like a whisper half caught, then died completely. The hum of hydraulics grew louder, pressing through the cockpit floor like heartbeat and memory combined. Erin kept her gaze forward. Her breathing didn't change. Every motion from here on would be measured, deliberate, exact. In the distance, where sky met dust, something shifted. A glimmer, almost invisible. She said it softly, not to Mason, not even to the machine, to the air itself. "We've got company." The silence after was absolute. Falcon 1 flew on, a fragment of motion suspended in the pale horizon, the stillness around it tightening, alive, watching. The first impact came without warning, a metallic strike beneath the fuselage, sharp enough to rattle bone. The aircraft jolted sideways, instruments flickering white for half a breath before alarms flooded the cockpit. The sound was not explosive but surgical, a sound that knew where to cut. Captain Erin Rains didn't flinch. Her hand snapped to stabilize trim, right index finger toggling to isolate hydraulics. Years of repetition overtook thought. The aircraft banked, rolled, and steadied, its frame groaning in protest. Across from her, Lieutenant Mason Cole's reflexes lagged half a second, just long enough for panic to show before he caught it. His gloved hands gripped the console, knuckles pale through leather, altitude dropping, pressure fluctuating, warnings cascading. The hum of the engines turned into a jagged roar, uneven, feral. The world beyond the canopy fractured into glare and smoke. The desert below no longer looked still. It twisted and burned with light, as if reflecting their distress. Erin scanned readouts. No missile lock, no heat signature. Yet the hit had been precise, not shrapnel, kinetic, guided, deliberate. She rerouted hydraulics to secondary flow, the movement mechanical, memorized. Every action carried weight and calm, the choreography of control under chaos. A second impact struck the right wing. The airframe bucked hard, throwing Mason forward against the harness. Oxygen masks jolted free from their clips. The sound inside the cockpit wasn't loud, it was layered alarms, airflow, structural moan, the low resonance of controlled collapse. She countered the roll manually, pushing the stick forward, cutting thrust. The horizon spun once, twice, then steadied into angled descent. Her breath stayed even, altitude 21,000 and falling. Stabilizers failing. Mason said, "A fact, not a plea." She already knew. Her eyes flicked to the damage schematic. Right, aileron unresponsive, fuel imbalance rising. She transferred auxiliary pressure, locked the affected wing. The alarms multiplied, bright red across the panel. It wasn't panic that filled the space. It was procedure. Every sound was a checklist. Every warning light was a decision waiting to be made. Erin toggled comms. Falcon control. Falcon 1 static. No return. She didn't try again. The radar sweep caught motion at their rear quadrant. 2 fast returns. No identification. They came from high and wide, too disciplined to be amateurs. She banked left, fast and deliberate, cutting altitude again. Mason braced as inertia crushed them into their seats, G-force stacked across their chests, heavy and silent. Outside, contrails flared briefly, vanishing as if erased. Erin's eyes tracked movement through the glare, faint, geometric shapes cutting the horizon, sleek, gray, and deliberate. Interceptors. It wasn't insurgents. It wasn't random. It was design. Her pulse slowed. Anger turned cold. She knew this kind of hunt, where targets weren't enemies but lessons, where airspace wasn't chance but trap. Someone had mapped their route and timed the sky to their path. The first hostile pass came low, nearly invisible. The sound didn't come from the aircraft. It came from the air being torn apart around them. The slipstream shook the frame. A sound like thunder folded through steel. A warning flare burst behind them, catching sunlight like falling sparks. The heat bloom reflected in her visor, turning the cockpit to gold and fire. Mason tried to compensate for angle, his voice cracking under strain. Erin overrode him with one motion, her control inputs exact, minimal, flawless. The aircraft dove through the turbulence, trading altitude for speed. Below, the desert's contours rose fast, ridges, dried basins, shadow. The color of survival was no longer blue, but dust. The pressure of descent pressed every sound into a single tone. Air screamed across the hull, panels flexed. One of the side indicators flickered out entirely. She guided them into a terrain-following pattern, hugging the contours of the earth. It wasn't escape, it was concealment. At 6,000 feet, the ground reappeared in sharp focus, dunes cut by canyon lines, heat shimmer crawling across stone. Keep eyes forward, she told herself, quiet enough the air might swallow it. They cut through wind shear and low vapor. Every second of control cost her strength. Small corrections against invisible pressure. The sky became a living thing, testing her. Behind them, the radar pinged again, closer now. The interceptors were adjusting, adapting to her maneuvers. Whoever flew them knew her methods, her habits, her jaw set. The realization sank like metal into water. This wasn't chance. This was memory turned against her. The first missile broke through cloud cover. Not direct, not lethal, but coercive. It detonated off their left quarter, shaking the hull with concussion. Debris rattled like rain on the canopy. Mason flinched. She didn't. Her mind went blank in the way only training allows. Reflex took command. She rolled the aircraft inverted, diving through debris, then leveled at 500 feet above desert floor. The landscape blurred into streaks of beige and white. Alarms merged into one continuous scream. Fuel cell integrity compromised. Stabilizer fault. Primary power fluctuation. Each warning layered over the next, like an orchestra of controlled failure. She throttled back again. Hold together, she thought. Not prayer, not plea, just command. The machine responded, groaning but alive. A second missile approached. Tracking. Deliberate. She banked hard right, countered with countermeasure release. Flares cut across the sky like molten rain. The missile veered off, arcing away into horizon light. Her control inputs became instinct, angles, airspeed, gravity, the language of survival. Mason struggled to steady his breathing. His gloves trembled against the throttle. She glanced at him once, not for reassurance, but calibration. He was still operational. That was enough. Their altitude dropped again, the air thickening around them. Every movement of the aircraft now carried weight, like flying through resistance itself. Through the chaos, Erin's mind stayed linear. She mapped enemy approach, potential fuel range, and extraction window all at once. It wasn't fear that drove her. It was defiance. They fired again. A controlled burst from above, rounds scattering into air. One tore across the left wing, metal peeling in clean lines. Sparks erupted, fading instantly in the slipstream. The aircraft pitched, dipped, then righted, her hands firm, unshaken. She had no illusions of rescue. The comms were gone, navigation half dead, and the sky itself had turned against them. But still, she flew. That was the core of her endurance without audience. The engines coughed, then roared again, defying physics through will alone. For a moment, the sound almost resembled breath, her breath, a sync between human and machine. They broke through a final cloud layer, descending into light fractured by sand. The attackers didn't follow immediately. They held distance, orbiting, waiting. That pause told her everything. This wasn't pursuit. It was observation, a hunt measured for message, not kill. She steadied her hand on the throttle, eyes scanning ahead. They're not trying to destroy us, she realized. They're trying to see what we do. The anger that rose in her wasn't loud. It was quiet, disciplined, the kind born from betrayal. She adjusted course again, pushing the aircraft beyond operational limits. Every bolt and panel screamed under strain. The engines flared once, twice, then flickered. Electrical systems dimmed. The panels went black. The cockpit filled with a ghostly silence broken only by wind tearing through structure. For the first time since takeoff, there was no hum, no guidance, no control. Only weightless descent. The light outside turned white. Absolute. Erin's hand hovered over dead controls. Her expression didn't change. The stillness of her body said everything. A soldier meeting silence as if it were an old companion. Below, the earth waited, rising fast. The hum was gone. The silence had returned. The first rotation came like gravity finding its voice. The aircraft tilted past equilibrium, one wing catching heat, the other catching light, and the world outside became a blur of smoke, cloud, and earth. The sun strobed through the fractured canopy, casting broken halos across Erin's visor. Every flash carved a new contour of descent. The horizon vanished, replaced by motion. Altitude spiraled down. 14,000. 11. 8. And the sky folded into the color of burning glass. Inside the cockpit, time slowed. Warning tones blended into a single sustained alarm. Hydraulic pressure bled out like pulse, each system flickering through its last breath. The air smelled of heat and metal. Erin's hands never left the controls. Her grip wasn't desperate. It was surgical. Each movement came measured, even as the world spun beyond comprehension. Her mind filtered noise into priority, stabilize roll, balance trim, compensate drag. The descent wasn't panic. It was physics, discipline, and will colliding in silence. Behind her, Mason hung limp in his restraints, unconscious or pretending. It didn't matter now. Betrayal was weightless compared to gravity. The aircraft's shadow danced over the desert far below, a distorted ghost flickering through dust haze. Erin rerouted what power remained to the stabilizers. The system protested with static. Partial control returned, faint, but real. The rotation slowed, the cockpit leveling by degrees. Every fraction of correction felt like defiance against inevitability. Outside, the air screamed. The temperature climbed. The altimeter continued to spin. She adjusted throttle manually, bleeding what little thrust remained into drag control. The aircraft steadied, wings trembling with strain. At 6,000 feet, the world came back into focus. A horizon burned red by evening light, the ground veined with dry riverbeds and stone ridges. Each line below her was a choice crash or land with intention. The aircraft's hydraulics failed another circuit. The yoke stiffened, her shoulders tensed. The sweat inside her gloves turned cold. Oxygen levels dropped. The warning light pulsed with steady rhythm, the same tempo as her breathing. 4 seconds in, 3 seconds out. She repeated the rhythm until her heartbeat matched the aircraft's vibration. Control through cadence. The oldest trick in aviation, the last habit of survival. The airframe shuddered again, a sound like a groan from something alive. A panel detached from the wing, vanishing into the slipstream. Erin ignored it. Her focus narrowed to the intersection of numbers and instinct. 5,000 feet, speed decaying, angle too steep, the desert below blurred, ridges, valleys, fractures of heat shimmer. She could almost smell it now, the scent of scorched earth rising even at altitude. Her jaw locked, eyes forward. No emotion, no hesitation. Every control input became smaller, sharper, exact. A pilot's prayer wasn't words, it was precision. 3,000 feet. The left engine sputtered. Flames licked the intake before vanishing. Power loss complete. The cockpit dimmed to twilight. Only the red emergency light remained, glowing faintly through smoke. 2,000 feet. The wind roared louder now, pressing through the fractured canopy like a living thing. Every sound merged into a single note, the voice of descent itself. Aaron reached forward, disengaged the last hydraulic lock, and manually trimmed the elevators. Her body strained against inertia, every muscle locked in controlled defiance. The horizon leveled slightly. The aircraft flattened its spiral, trading chaos for direction. She exhaled, one breath, then another. The alarms continued but softer, fading behind her focus. The sky turned molten, light scattering through haze, painting everything in gold and dust. She knew she couldn't land it clean, but she could make it survivable. Below. A stretch of open sand, flat, pale, and wide enough to matter. Her training returned in fragments glide ratio, stall speed, surface texture, memory shaped into action. Stay awake, she told herself. Not command, not comfort, just continuity. She pitched nose up slightly, holding the line. The sound of airflow thickened, then thinned. The aircraft fought back, shaking, resisting, alive in its refusal to die quietly. At 1,000 feet, the sky looked like water, fluid and bright. Every reflection blurred into one long memory of endurance. The final descent was slow enough for thought, but too fast for fear. She watched the gauges die one by one, a ritual of endings. Altitude 900, airspeed unstable, fuel dry, hydraulics gone. Her gloves were slick now, her breathing steady. The desert waited, still, silent, infinite, 500 feet. She pulled the nose up one last time, no strength left to spare. The aircraft obeyed halfway, shuddering, wings flexing in agony. Then impact. The sound arrived like thunder trapped inside bone. Metal tore against earth, sand exploded in clouds of colorless fire. The fuselage split, skidding across the flat in rolling bursts. Panels sheared off. The canopy imploded inward, shards scattering like dust in sunlight. The world became vibration. The body's memory of motion after motion stopped. When the dust settled, silence reigned again. For a long time, nothing moved. Then, through the twisted frame, a hand, gloved, trembling but alive. Captain Erin Rains pulled herself free from the wreckage, one deliberate motion at a time. The air was thick with smoke and heat. Her visor was cracked, her uniform torn, the patch on her shoulder, the Falcon insignia hung by a single stitch. She stood slowly, one knee braced against the scorched earth. The horizon swayed but held. Her body hurt in a dozen places, but pain meant presence. Pain meant alive. Behind her, the wreck burned in slow silence, a mechanical sunset. She looked toward it once, then away. No words, no gesture, only breath. The desert around her stretched endless, a place without echo. Yet in the emptiness, something sacred remained, the quiet after endurance. Her chest rose and fell, steady now. She reached up, unlatched her helmet, and let the wind touch her face. It smelled of dust, heat, and nothing else. For a moment, she stood between ruin and sky, the embodiment of what survival really meant, not victory, not escape, just continuance. The light softened, the sound faded, the dust around her settled into stillness. In that stillness, the world seemed to breathe again, slow, heavy, alive. Captain Erin Rains, United States Marine Corps, was still standing. Her aircraft was gone, her mission lost, her purpose changed, But the silence, that eternal companion, remained. She took one step forward, the weight of her boots sinking into the sand. Then another. Every movement said what words could not: endurance without applause, strength without witness. The camera of the world, if it existed, would hold there, on a single figure walking through ruin, framed by sun and smoke, not triumphant, not defeated, just enduring. And as the wind carried the last traces of the crash into distance, a single thought passed through her. Clear, simple, final, still flying. What do you hold on to when the noise fades and the world finally stops moving? For Captain Aaron Rains, it wasn't glory, it wasn't rage, it was the quiet, the one sound that never lied. Out there, control wasn't a switch you flipped. It was breath by breath, decision by decision, until silence became the only proof you were still alive. Maybe that's what endurance really is, not power, but patience under pressure. Tell me what you would have done when gravity turned against you. I read everyone. If this story reminded you that composure is a weapon, stay with us. Subscribe, drop a comment, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next debrief, the next moment when calm meets chaos. Share this with someone who thinks strength is loud. The desert's quiet again. For now. Until the next flight breaks the silence,